In this lesson, we're going to talk about one of the more advanced reading comprehension question types where you're asked to apply information from the passage to a task. So these application tasks, they are not that frequent. You're going to likely encounter a maximum of one application task per question or per passage, just because they are generally of a harder difficulty and they take some time. So the exam doesn't load up on this type of question in reading comprehension. They are, again, harder tasks that involve matching the information from the passage to a correct choice in the correct fashion, and they are a little bit more unique in their structure than the other more standard question tasks. It also will include critical reasoning style questions in reading comprehension. So they might ask you to affect an argument, evaluate the author's argument, strengthen, weaken a position in the passage. So these are the critical reasoning style questions in reading comprehension as well. And they also can be possible harder tasks for integrated reasoning, two-part analysis, and multi-source reasoning questions. So again, you recognize that in that vestigial tail section of the exam that they can have both quantitative and verbal concepts. So this is one of the harder verbal concepts that you can encounter in two-part or multi-source reasoning questions on the integrated reasoning. Now, the strategic implications. First, you have to carefully note the subject and limit your consideration of the task to that topic. Do not think about the passage holistically. You are being asked specifically to apply information about a individual piece of information, so don't broaden it unnecessarily to the passage overall. You will want to summarize the subject as a functional prediction, but you're not going to be able to specifically predict what the answer should be. Because if you're looking for something that is analogous to the scenario involving the sloth in the passage, you're not going to be able to come up with what the exam believes is the right answer abstractly, because it could be anything. You just have to make sure that you understand the topic and are able to apply the information about said theoretical sloth. They are often indicated by the phrase "of the following." Now, that said, "of the following" is a phrase that you'll see in many reading comprehension tasks, so make sure that you don't mistakenly identify an inference or a detail or purpose question as an application task just simply because you see "of the following." If it can be categorized as one of the other three task types, it probably is that task type. You'll also want to apply those critical reasoning processes as needed based on what the question stem is. So again, if you're being asked to weaken, follow the weaken critical reasoning process. If you're asked to strengthen, follow the strengthen critical reasoning process, so on and so forth. And this is the most reasonably skipped reading comprehension task if you're behind in pace, because it's going to be asking about a specific piece of information, and applying that piece of information, it will generally be more time consuming than your average, more conventional reading comprehension test. And it's probably not going to relate to another question in the set. So if you have to skip something because you're behind in your pacing, in reading comprehension, this is it. Don't skip the more attainable detail, purpose, or inference questions. These ones, though, maybe, but again, ideally, you'd rather be skipping an individual critical reasoning question because we know it's only going to impact one problem on the exam. Now, let's take a look at an example. So we've got a sample reading comprehension passage here, and we're going to assume that we've already read it because most of the time these kinds of questions come later in the passage, but not always. So we've got the question of, in which of the following environments would the impact of water be most similar to that of water on Anacapa Island? So we have to find water on Anacapa Island, and we find it here in the highlighted section. So you'll want to probably read a sentence above and a sentence below the first reference to water, but we'd begin, given its rugged coastline and dearth of safe boat landings, ancient foraging on Anacapa Island must have been relatively challenging. Today, fresh water is found only in an isolated spring with no perennial running water on any of the island segments. As a result, vegetation is currently dominated by coastal bluff scrub and coastal sage scrub, with trees and shrubs limited primarily to two protected gullies on the northern slope of West Anacapa and at Shepherd's Landing on Middle Anacapa. Okay, so we've got water on the island. Now, we then go through the answer choices and compare against the information that we saw and try to find something that is similar to there being fresh water only in an isolated spring and no perennial running water on any of the island segments. So, choice A, a peninsula with several perennially active waterfalls. Well, that goes directly against the information in this little excerpt, so that can be eliminated as a reversal. A heavily forested island with a centrally located lake. Well, if we've got a lake in the middle, that's a pretty large source of fresh water and probably going to result in some running water nearby it. So we can eliminate B for that reason as a reversal as well. Then choice C, a desert oasis with a single well and limited immediate vegetation. Well, if you're not careful, you might go, well, how is a desert oasis going to be similar to an island? Well, we're being asked about the impact of water in the environment. And here we've got one isolated source and no running water. And we've got vegetation that is not diverse. And we can see that, again, the vegetation in our highlight says it's dominated by coastal bluff scrub and coastal sage scrub, and there's not much else. So that matches pretty nicely, all things considered. Then choice D, a freshwater marsh at the bottom of a mountainous canyon. Well, we know that there's not much fresh water, not the least of which a marsh that would be, standing at all times, so that's out. And then E, a tropical rainforest with continually falling precipitation. Again, this is not the case here because there's limited water on the island. So this is how you approach the problem for an application task. You identify the source, summarize it for yourself, but again, you're not going to predict a desert oasis as your answer. You can only confirm that answer by comparing it against what you know of the situation that you're being asked about. Now, let's take a look at another question based on this passage, and here we're getting into critical reasoning in reading comp. So we've got which of the following, if true, would most help to explain the presence of large nesting bird colonies on Anacapa Island? So explain one of our critical reasoning tasks. So we've got to go find where we're talking about these large nesting bird colonies, and this is down at the end. So again, you probably want to read a little bit above. The sentence above isn't really that relevant to the nesting bird colonies that are the subject of this question, but you do so just to make sure that there wasn't anything that might be relevant. However, I'm just going to limit myself to what we've got in the highlight. So Anacapa Island hosts enormous colonies of nesting birds, especially western gulls and brown pelicans, the latter of which use Anacapa and Santa Barbara Islands as a primary nesting area along the west coast of the United States. Note that I did not read the parenthetical scientific names. That's just a waste of time. You don't need to know those unless they ask about those, and they're completely irrelevant, and they want you to waste time there. So just ignore terms that are that obscure and are going to just simply be difficult to pronounce in your own head. But now we've got to show why there are these nesting birds. Now, choice A, we've got sea lions and harbor seals are primary predators of brown pelicans. Well, we can't just say, I didn't see that. Much like the actual critical reasoning, we have to go make sure that these things aren't in there. And if we go into the passage, we find them here. And we've got California sea lions and harbor seals are commonly seen in the waters and rocks around the island, but the absence of extensive beaches, except at Frenchie's Cove on West Anacapa, limits the area for pinnipeds to haul out. And we can logically deduce that pinnipeds are the sea lions and the harbor seals. And to haul out means they'd be resting on the beach. So if they don't rest on the beach, well, now we've got a reason potentially that the birds do use the beaches as a nesting area, because now we discover that their predators are not necessarily able to come ashore. So this does, to a degree, explain the presence of the large nesting bird colonies, because it says that since the seals and sea lions cannot get to the shore, the birds are protected from their potential primary predator. Then for choice B, kelp forests are prevalent on the coasts of many California islands. Well, many California islands, okay? If that's the case, then it doesn't necessarily provide differentiation for Anacapa Island. And we need to know why Anacapa is different, so that doesn't explain it anything, it kind of makes it less reasonable to understand the presence of the large nesting bird colonies. Then choice C, some ancient cultures believe birds to be mythological in nature. Some ancient cultures could not be a more vague term if it tried, and it really has no impact on why these birds would be able to nest on this island. So we can eliminate that pretty readily. Then we've got steep slopes can provide nesting areas for migratory birds, but that can doesn't explain why it does happen here. It's too vague. And also, we don't know anything about the migratory status of these western gulls or brown pelicans. So that's also kind of vague. You'd be making an assumption yourself, and we don't want to do that, of course. And then most pelicans and gulls are known to be carnivorous. Okay, I need to know more information about how that impacts things. Are there things that the gulls eat off of this island or not? And again, most pelicans and gulls, I don't know if that includes these specific western gulls and brown pelicans. So many reasons to potentially eliminate E, and we select A as being supported broadly by the passage earlier in a spot that we may not have remembered but have to go confirm. And that does help to explain why the pelicans and potentially the gulls as well are able to nest comfortably on Anacapa Island. Now, let's talk about the process that we've illustrated here. So step one is identify the question task, recognize the key phrase of the following, and do try to categorize it as one of the other tasks, because if it can be, it's one of the other tasks. These are rarer, and many of the question stems will use the phrase of the following. But if it can't be categorized as detail, purpose, or inference, it's an application. Then you'll want to read the prompt and note the relevant details. You'll have to use the specific term or location reference to target your reading. Make sure that you're looking specifically for what they're asking about. And do read at least a sentence above and below to guarantee context, but recognize that you may not need as much context. However, as we saw with our previous question, sometimes you have to confirm whether information is or is not contained elsewhere in the passage. Step 3 is going to be to predict, but you want to only broadly predict by summarizing what the passage said about that subject in question. And then, of course, process of eliminate. Focus on what matches the information in the passage to identify specifically objective reasons that choices are wrong, things that are reversals, things that are extreme based on the information in the passage, things that require additional information. And of course, if you're talking about critical reasoning in reading comprehension tasks, you want to use common argumentation in correct answer reasons. So remember things like vague, additional information required, a reversal, things that truly have no impact whether they're true or false when you're considering elimination on critical reasoning tasks in reading comprehension. So that's our approach for one of these rarer and honestly, in most cases, more difficult tasks on the reading comprehension portion of the verbal section. Let's go over to the whiteboard now and take a look at a couple more examples of this specific task type. All right, let's take a look at this sample passage and a couple of application tasks that could be derived from the information contained within. So with this passage, we'll assume that we've already read it, and these again are probably later question tasks in the passage. So we'll just set up our scratch pad. We got A, B, C, D, E, put a little line over top for what the task is, and we got to read that task first. So it says, which of the following, if true, would most undermine the author's conclusion regarding the success of the South Texas Mariachi Festival? So we're basically looking to weaken that STMF conclusion. So they give us that term to basically go seek. And so we're going to look for success of the South Texas Mariachi Festival. And we find it right here in the passage. So at the beginning of a paragraph, can be a little bit more loose in not going a sentence above and just kind of stick to where I am. But I'm going to read at least this sentence here to start and try to figure out what the conclusion is that I need to weaken. So the success of the South Texas Mariachi Festival was made of several ingredients. Unequivocal community support generated through a pre-existing school program, no frills budgeting, and the total commitment of the organizer. These same components are typically found in many of the mariachi festivals and conferences that have been held throughout the Southwest in the past 20 years. Okay, so the conclusion is that, and our prediction by extension, so we can just put a P here, is we need to find info to show that the STMF success not of the ingredients listed by the author. And you don't want to write them all out necessarily, but that's basically our prediction. We're trying to show that it wasn't these ingredients of unequivocal community support generated through a pre-existing school program, no frills budgeting, and the total commitment of the organizer. We want to find something else that led to the success. So choice A, many South Texas towns, including Driscoll and Corpus Christi, are known to have dynamic mariachi music communities. Well, it said there was community support, so this would actually be strengthening the argument. So this is a reversal. Then, for choice B, we've got a single benefactor regularly donated thousands of dollars to John Vela without dictating how the funds were to be allocated. Okay, so again, you have to make sure that this person's name isn't somewhere else in the passage, because that's how the exam generates difficulty. And we discover that the dedicated junior high school music teacher mentioned throughout the passage is John Vela. And that fellow, John Vela, if he were given thousands of dollars without being told how to allocate the funds, are the community support, no frills budgeting, and the commitment of the organizer really the generators of the success, or is it these thousands of no strings attached dollars? So this would show that there's another reason for the success. So that would match our prediction of showing it's not because of the ingredients that they listed, it's because there was this benefactor who gave John Vela a bunch of money. Now, moving to choice C, the success of the South Texas Mariachi Festival has inspired similar events beyond the American Southwest. Well, what happens after the festival doesn't impact how the festival began and succeeded in the first place. So this has truly no impact, because whether it does or doesn't go beyond the one festival doesn't impact its success to start. So that's out. Now, choice D, there is no record of mariachi education being conducted at the junior high level in Texas prior to the 1990s. Well, the lack of record keeping, that requires additional information. So we have no idea about how that would impact the conclusion of the author. And then lastly, historically, mariachi has been a more popular art form in California than it has been in Texas. Okay, well, we talked about California in the passage, but it has nothing to do with the success of this specific mariachi festival. So again, in order to apply this, we need additional information. So we end up with choice B as a nearly critical reasoning weakened style question within reading comprehension as the proper way to undermine the author's conclusion in the passage regarding this specific subject of the South Texas Mariachi Festival. Now, let's bring in one more question here and work it in a similar fashion. So you can see that application question tasks can also be fill in the blank. You have fill in the blanks in critical reasoning. You can have fill in the blanks in reading comprehension. And again, one of the ways that they generate difficulty is not by giving you an entirely new idea, but importing things and combining different styles of question and task. So we've got our answer choices here, starting A, B, C, D, E, setting up the process of elimination, and we're being asked to find an event that would most likely have a mission similar to that of the first mariachi festival held by John Vela in Driscoll, Texas. So we are seeking a match in the mission to the JV GMF, so the John Vella Mariachi Festival. Again, you can shorthand summarize these sorts of things, but we've got to figure out what the mission was in the first place. So go find our friend John Vella, who we just saw is up here, and we're going to read at least a sentence above and below where we start talking about the first mariachi festival. And so we'll go all the way through here until the next year. And you may have to read more. That, again, is how they'll generate difficulties, just by making you evaluate more of the passage. But in 1991, a dedicated junior high school music teacher named John Vella organized a mariachi festival in the South Texas town of Driscoll. Vella had been teaching mariachi music in public schools since 1980 and wanted to provide an intensive learning experience for his students. Ooh, so there would be the mission is to teach the students. Working with a budget of only $4,000, Vella was able to bring 4 maestros of mariachi music from California to conduct workshops in guitarrón, vihuela, guitar, violin, and trumpet. During this 2-day event, 150 students were immersed in intensive instrumental workshops and experienced presentations in mariachi history by the late Nicolas Torres, an early member of the legendary mariachi Vargas de Tecalitlán. The event culminated in a concert which featured professional groups from Corpus Christi as well as student musicians. Now, one thing you shouldn't do, which I did here, is actually try to pronounce these unfamiliar proper names. Just make them into initials so that you're not wasting time doing that. But we know that the mission was to teach the students. We wanted to teach the students about mariachi. So a paid concert featuring Latin music superstars. Well, that is to make money. That is not to teach students. So that is just simply not a match. Now, small fundraising performance of high school band members. Well, again, we're being asked to teach the students, not to fundraise. So that is not a match either. A free dance intended as an ice-breaking event within a gated community. Well, there's nothing about trying to ice break, so that's not the goal that is similar to the mission of John Vella's Driscoll, Texas First Mariachi Festival. A car show in which novice mechanics team with experienced ones to fine-tune custom hot rods. Oh, well, we've got experienced mechanics giving a lesson to more inexperienced or novice ones. And if you don't know these terms of novice, because that could be part of the challenge, this could be a question mark. But if you know what novice means, this is teaching through experience, which is basically what John Vella was trying to do in his mariachi festival. And then a traveling mariachi tour moving from one city to another without much local interaction. Well, again, we want to interact with the local students. So this, if anything, could be categorized as a reversal. So there's our correct answer for this one. And these are a couple of great examples of how to engage with some of the more nuanced and complex question tasks that you'll have in reading comprehension, hopefully making them less intimidating as you engage with these, more, again, unconventional phrasings and tasks as they're requested. So you can perform these processes on your own when you encounter such unique questions on future practice problems.